Shut up, you grumpy old man. The high-pitched, childish voice cut through the silence of the underground parking lot, causing Noah Stone to freeze with his hand on the door handle of his Mercedes-Benz S-Class. At 45, CEO of Stone Tech, a technology empire valued in the billions, Noah was used to being obeyed, not told to shut up by a child. He turned irritated to find a little black girl, maybe 7 years old, with colorful braids and eyes that radiated an insolence he hadn't seen since his own rebellious adolescence. She wasn't speaking to him, but to a stray dog barking incessantly. At the flat tire of a random car, a popular model that stood out against the row of luxury vehicles. The shrill sound of the bark, which had previously bothered him, now seemed a mere detail compared to the audacity of that small figure, an uncomfortable reminder that not everything in his world could be controlled with a click or an order. My name is Noah, and at that moment the only thing going through my mind was how ridiculous I looked. A man who controlled the fate of thousands of employees, being indirectly reprimanded by a child. The scene was almost comical, if not for the urgency of his schedule. He had a crucial meeting in 20 minutes, one that could define the future of a new billion-dollar project. But something about that girl's intensity, the way she dominated the situation with the dog, made him hesitate. It wasn't the first time that small deviations from the perfectly planned script of his life had caught him off guard. He remembered an anonymous email months ago, warning of a security breach in one of his systems, which he had dismissed as spam, a mere nuisance in his inbox. Or that report from an intern about employee dissatisfaction in a key department, which he had simply filed away, convinced that turnover was natural. Small noises in the system, which he, in his arrogance, always ignored, convinced that his business acumen was the only one that mattered, and that any criticism was merely envy or incompetence. He had built his fortune on the premise that efficiency and logic prevailed over any emotion, and now a child was challenging that foundation. The dog's barking abruptly stopped. The girl, with a victorious smile, stroked the animal's head. "See? Just talk to it affectionately." She then looked at Noah, and the smile faded, replaced by an expression of pure contempt. "What? Haven't you ever seen a child and a dog talk?" The question, laden with irony that struck him right in the face, made Noah feel like an intruder in his own parking lot. This unexpected encounter, in the midst of his armored routine, felt like a harbinger. Something was off, and it wasn't just the flat tire. It was an uneasy feeling, the same one he'd felt when he'd seen his main competitor, Mark Ellison, a man he considered a friend, speaking secretly with one of his most talented engineers last week. Noah had chosen to ignore it, chalking the encounter up to coincidence, mere chance. But the seed of distrust had already been planted, growing silently in his subconscious, fueled by every small crack in his facade of control. The girl stood, still staring at Noah with those defiant eyes. "You shouldn't be here," she said with a seriousness that belied her age. "This place isn't for you." The sentence, spoken with such conviction, disarmed him. What did he mean? It wasn't for him? He was the owner of the building, the king of this castle of concrete and glass, the architect of his own destiny, but the way she spoke with an almost ancestral authority made him question his own sovereignty, his very presence. This parking lot, which he considered his domain, suddenly seemed like hostile territory, and he, an invader. The small figure, with her aura of mystery and unexpected wisdom, had planted a deep doubt in the CEO's mind. If you're enjoying this story and want to discover how a simple "shut up" can destabilize an empire, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next chapters. What did that little girl know that Noah, in his ivory tower, hadn't yet realized? And why did the contempt in her eyes seem so familiar, like an echo of something he'd tried to bury long ago, a debt he'd refused to pay, but which now seemed to be knocking at his door with an urgency he could no longer ignore? The girl's words echoed in Noah's mind as he finally got into his car, the luxurious interior suddenly feeling empty. "This place isn't for you." Those words, spoken with such strange conviction, dredged up memories he'd buried beneath layers of success and cynicism. He remembered his own childhood, in a neighborhood where pavement was a luxury and opportunities were distant mirages. He had fought, tooth and nail, to get out, to build his stone-tech empire brick by brick, code by code, and now a child confronted him with the shadow of his past, with the memory of a world he'd sworn to leave behind. The injustice he felt wasn't just the girl's, but that of a system he, in a way, now represented. A system he'd mastered, but never truly accepted him. That seemingly trivial encounter in the parking lot had opened a chink in his armor of indifference, allowing doubt and anger to seep in. At the meeting, the tension was palpable, thick as the smoke from an expensive cigar. Mark Ellison, his supposed longtime friend and now sworn rival, smiled with a confidence that Noah found unbearable, almost obscene. "Noah, my dear, I heard you had a little mishap in the parking lot. Nothing serious, I hope." The jab, disguised as concern, was a cruel reminder that Mark never missed an opportunity to undermine his authority, to poke at his oldest wounds. Mark, the perfect antagonist, personified the arrogance Noah so despised, but which, ironically, he himself had cultivated throughout his rise. He was the heir to an ancient fortune, a legacy of privilege that shielded him from adversity, who had never had to fight for anything other than maintaining his status. He saw Noah, the self-made man, as an anomaly to be corrected, an interloper in his exclusive club of blue bloods, a man who dared to defy the natural order of things. With every glance Mark gave, Noah felt the weight of all the years of veiled contempt, of all the doors that had been slammed in his face for not having the right last name. Obstacles began to crop up like weeds in a meticulously tended garden. A crucial contract with an Asian supplier was mysteriously delayed, with the flimsy excuse of unexpected logistical issues. A long-time investor who had backed Noah since StoneTech's early days withdrew his support without any plausible explanation, just a cold, formal email. And to top off the week of misfortune, the media began running subtle but corrosive articles about StoneTech's questionable ethics, hinting at shady practices and a toxic work environment. Noah knew with a chilling certainty it was Mark. Ellison's cruelty manifested itself not in direct attacks, in open confrontations, but in calculated moves, like a chess player moving his pieces to slowly suffocate his opponent, piece by piece, until the inevitable surrender. With each blow, Noah felt the pressure increase, the noose tightening, but also an old flame rekindled in his chest. The resilience that had pulled him from the periphery, that had seen him through harsh winters and scorching summers, hadn't disappeared. It had simply slumbered beneath the deceptive comfort of his wealth. He remembered the sleepless nights, programming on an old computer, the hunger he felt, the promise he made to himself to never be trampled again, to never be the invisible boy again. This motivation, deep and visceral, was the fuel he needed to not only resist, but to fight back. On a rainy night, as he reviewed old documents in his office, the silence of the city outside was broken only by the patter of rain against the glass. Noah found an old email from Mark, from years ago, with a partnership proposal he had rejected. In the email, Mark made disparaging remarks about Noah's humble origins, calling him the street kid who got lucky, a passing phenomenon who would soon return to where he should never have left. Anger boiled in Noah's chest, a pent-up fury threatening to explode, but he channeled it, turning it into focus. This wasn't just about business, it was personal. It was about validating his journey, about proving that the street kid wasn't just lucky, but a ruthless strategist, a visionary who built his own empire without inheritance or privilege. He began to observe Mark more closely, noticing the Small slip-ups, the chinks in the armor of the man who considered himself untouchable, the cracks in his facade of perfection. Each humiliation, each low blow Ellison suffered, only strengthened something within him that his oppressors couldn't see, a quiet strength fueled by the very injustice they tried to impose, a steely determination that grew with each adversity. What Mark didn't know was that by trying to take Noah down, he was only awakening the predator that had been forced to hide beneath the polished skin of a CEO. And what would happen when this predator, with years of experience, surviving and thriving against all odds, finally decided to hunt, using Mark's own rules of the game against him? The little girl in the parking lot, with her "shut up," had been the trigger. But Mark Ellison would be the prime target of a revenge that would be served cold, calculated, and above. All devastating. The game was just beginning, and Noah was ready to play all his cards. Noah's pent-up fury, sparked by the little girl and fueled by Mark Ellison's machinations, transformed into a cold, calculating energy. He knew he couldn't attack head-on. Mark was powerful, well-connected, and, above all, expected an impulsive reaction. Noah, however, had learned the art of patience and deception. His first moves were subtle, almost imperceptible. He began discreetly reassigning some of his most talented engineers to a secret project, away from the prying eyes of Mark and his corporate spies. The official excuse was disruptive innovation, a term vague enough not to arouse suspicion, but which in reality hid the genesis of his counter-offensive. He was building a fortress, an arsenal, without anyone noticing. Mark's attacks in turn intensified. Stone Tech began to suffer from coordinated cyber attacks, which, while not causing irreparable damage, were irritating and costly. The press, previously only subtle, now published more aggressive articles, questioning Noah's leadership and the company's financial stability. "Stone Tech on the brink of collapse," blared one headline, with a photo of Noah looking exhausted. Mark Ellison, in interviews, wore a condescending smile, publicly lamenting the mismanagement of his former friend. He was reveling in Noah's downfall, convinced that StoneTech's CEO was a broken man, ready to crack under pressure. This underestimation was Noah's most potent weapon, the trump card Mark would never see coming. It was in this landscape of controlled chaos that Noah sought his first ally. Not an executive in an impeccable suit, but an unlikely figure. Dr. Evelyn Reed, an ethical hacker and former cybersecurity professor known for her brilliant mind and her disdain for corporations. Noah found her in an obscure cafe, away from prying eyes. Evelyn, with her purple hair and piercings, was the opposite of everything Noah stood for, but her reputation for uncovering the most closely guarded secrets was legendary. "You want to take down a giant, don't you?" she asked bluntly, stirring her coffee. "And you want me to help you find the cracks in his armor?" Noah nodded. He knew he needed someone who thought outside the box, someone undaunted by Ellison's power. Evelyn, with an enigmatic smile, accepted the challenge, not for the money, but for the chance to expose the hypocrisy of the powerful. She was the missing piece in Noah's chessboard. While Evelyn began her digital investigation, Noah focused on strengthening StoneTech's internal defenses, turning each of Mark's attacks into a lesson. He implemented new security protocols, trained his teams, and most importantly began cultivating the loyalty of his employees, those he had ignored during his rise. Small victories began to emerge. A cyber attack was neutralized before it could cause major damage. A negative article was refuted with irrefutable facts, and internal trust began to be restored. Mark, in his arrogance, saw these movements as mere spasms of a dying man, unable to perceive that Noah was, in fact, preparing for war. He was weaving an invisible web, gathering information, mapping Ellison's vulnerabilities, turning each humiliation into a building block for his own fortress. The decision was made. Noah would not only survive, he would thrive, and Mark Ellison would pay the price for underestimating the street urchin. What Mark didn't know was that, while he celebrated his small victories, Noah was just warming up for the real thing. What would Evelyn Reed discover in Ellison's digital files that would completely change the course of this battle? And how would Noah use this information to turn the tide once and for all, transforming humiliation into a spectacular triumph, while Mark Ellison reveled in Noah's apparent fragility, toasting expensive champagne in his office overlooking the city? Dr. Evelyn Reed, with the agility of a digital ninja and the patience of a hunter, delved into the depths of Ellison's network. Days turned into nights, and strong coffee was her only companion, the sole witness to her relentless pursuit. She sought not just security flaws, mere holes in the system, but the essence of corruption, the most closely guarded secrets that sustained Mark's empire, built on a foundation of lies and manipulation. Noah, for his part, was not idle. Out of the spotlight, he spent hours in his private war room, a discreet office on a secluded floor of StoneTech, analyzing financial reports, market patterns, and most importantly, Mark's behavior. He studied his opponent's every move, every public statement, every forced smile, like a chess master anticipating his opponent's next 10 moves, visualizing every possible scenario and its respective countermeasures. The little girl in the parking lot, with her genuine contempt, had been the catalyst, the spark that lit the fuse, but Noah's revenge would be a masterpiece of social and digital engineering, a plan as intricate as the circuitry of a microchip. Evelyn, one cold morning, sent Noah an encrypted message, a sign that the hunt had been successful. Bingo! It's not just corruption, it's a snake pit, and the snakes are venomous. She had uncovered a complex network of shell companies, offshore tax havens, and illicit transactions that Ellison used to embezzle funds, launder dirty money, and worse, finance smear campaigns against competitors, including StoneTech, using dirty and unethical tactics. There was irrefutable evidence, compromising emails, expertly doctored bank statements, incriminating phone recordings, and even a digital diary, where Mark detailed his schemes with an arrogance bordering on psychopathy, believing himself untouchable. The icing on the cake, the piece that would seal Ellison's fate, was Mark's connection to a public infrastructure bid-rigging scheme, involving high-ranking political figures, exposing a web of corruption that extended far beyond the corporate world. The extent of the corruption was shocking, and Noah realized he was fighting not just a petty rival, but a corrupt system that Mark personified. That old email from Mark calling him a street kid who got lucky now seemed like a cruel joke, for Noah's luck was about to change the game forever, turning luck into justice. With the evidence in hand, as solid as diamonds, Noah and Evelyn devised a meticulous plan worthy of a high-octane spy film. The strategy was simple in its complexity, elegant in its execution. Dismantle Mark's empire piece by piece, using his own weapons against him, but legally and irrefutably, without giving him any escape. They created a schedule of information leaks, carefully orchestrated to cause maximum damage to Ellison's reputation and finances, leaving no trace that could lead to Noah, keeping him in the shadows until the right moment. The first step would be an anonymous leak to an investigative technology blog, known for its editorial independence and its ability to make information go viral, reaching a mass audience. The goal was not only to expose Mark, but also to divert attention from the attacks StoneTech was suffering, transforming Noah from a victim into an unlikely hero, a corporate vigilante fighting corruption. With every detail of the plan, Noah felt a different kind of adrenaline rush, not of paralyzing fear, but of anticipation, the thrill of someone about to make history. He was preparing for the biggest move of his life, and Mark Ellison had no idea what was coming, living in his bubble of privilege. Noah's plan wasn't limited to exposing Mark's misdeeds. It also included a robust strategy to protect StoneTech from any retaliation, strengthening its cyber defenses with cutting-edge technology and preparing his legal team for a battle that would be fought on multiple fronts, both in the courts and in the public eye. He knew Mark wouldn't surrender easily, that he would fight with all his might, and that the war would be long and dirty, with cheap shots and personal attacks. But Noah was ready more than ever. Every day he remembered the little girl in the parking lot, the contempt in her eyes, and the silent promise he made to himself that no one would be underestimated again, that justice would prevail. He was turning anger into strategy, humiliation into motivation, the past into a springboard for the future. If you're following this journey of twists and turns and want to see how intelligence can unmask arrogance and how revenge can be a tool for justice, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the climax of this story. What would Mark do when he realized that the kid from the street had become the architect of his own downfall, using his own rules against him? And how would the little girl from the parking lot fit into this puzzle of justice and revenge, revealing an unexpected link that would change everything? The first leak, orchestrated with surgical precision, hit Mark Ellison like a bolt from the blue. The investigative technology blog published an explosive article detailing the first layers of corruption and defamation schemes. The article, which went viral within hours, caused a stir in the market and the media. The shares of Ellison's company, Apex Innovations, plummeted. Mark, in a fit of rage, called a press conference, vehemently denying all the accusations, calling them a smear campaign orchestrated by jealous competitors. He tried to play the victim, but his trembling voice and the cold sweat on his forehead betrayed his growing panic. He was used to controlling the narrative, manipulating public opinion, but now the narrative was out of his control, and he didn't know how to react. Ellison's arrogance was beginning to give way to desperation, a vision Noah savored from afar. While Mark tried to put out the fire, Evelyn launched the second attack. This time, it was emails and call recordings, released to a consortium of investigative journalists. The evidence was irrefutable. Mark's voice, clear and unmistakable, discussing the details of the public procurement fraud with political figures, emails with instructions to silence disgruntled employees. The scandal exploded, affecting not only Mark, but also the politicians involved, generating a wave of public outrage. Apex Innovations was target of federal investigations, and Mark's business partners began to distance themselves, fearing contamination. Mark Ellison, the untouchable, was being unmasked in public, and the humiliation was palpable. He tried to call Noah, but his calls were ignored. The one who had always underestimated him was now being hunted, and the irony of the situation was sweet to Noah. The climax came at a public hearing, convened to investigate the allegations against Mark. Noah, who had been called as a witness, sat calmly, watching Mark squirm under the questioning. Ellison, pale and visibly shaken, tried to deny it, but each denial was met with new evidence presented by Evelyn, who was working behind the scenes, feeding the prosecutors real-time information. It was then that Noah made his final move. He took the floor and, with a calm bordering on coldness, projected Mark's digital diary onto the auditorium's large screen. Not only the corruption schemes, but also Ellison's personal notes, where he mocked Noah's humble origins, calling him the street kid who should never have gotten out of the sewer. The room fell silent. Mark's humiliation was complete, public, and devastating. He lost not only his company, he lost his reputation, his dignity, everything he valued most. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now reflected pure panic, the realization that he had lost everything. But the final twist was yet to come. Amidst the chaos, a small figure emerged from the audience. accompanied by a woman. It was the little girl from the parking lot. She looked at Mark, who was in shock, and then at Noah with a subtle smile. The woman beside her was the girl's mother, a former Stone Tech employee who had been unfairly fired by Mark years ago when he tried to sabotage one of Noah's projects. The little girl, whose name was Maya, had recognized Mark from the parking lot, and upon seeing the blog post, told her mother about the grumpy old man. Maya's mother, in turn, had been one of Evelyn's anonymous sources, providing crucial information about Mark's early schemes. Maya's "shut up" wasn't just a childish rebuke. It was the first warning, the first link in a chain of events that would lead to the downfall of an empire. Noah, with a look of gratitude at Maya, realized that justice sometimes comes from the most unexpected places, and that true revenge isn't just destroying those who wronged you, but building something greater than they could ever imagine. As the revelations piled up and the masks fell, one question lingered. Could bridges across such deep chasms of prejudice and privilege be built, or was Mark's downfall just the beginning of a new era of justice? Mark Ellison's downfall was spectacular and complete. His company, Apex Innovations, crumbled under the weight of investigations and investor flight. He was indicted for fraud, money laundering and corruption, and his last public image was of a man in handcuffs, his face disfigured by despair, being led out of the courtroom. The empire he built on arrogance and dishonesty lay in ruins, and he found himself isolated, bankrupt, and humiliated, a pariah in the business world he so cherished. Noah's revenge was not just the destruction of an enemy, but the restoration of order, proof that sometimes justice finds its way, even if it needs a little push. Noah Stone, on the other hand, emerged from the chaos not only unscathed, but transformed. Stone Tech, once a target of attacks, was now seen as a bastion of integrity and innovation. The story of how Noah exposed Ellison's corruption spread, and he became a symbol of resilience and business ethics. But the biggest change wasn't in his fortune or reputation, but in his own perception. The little girl Maya, who had confronted him in the parking lot, and her mother became important figures in his life. Noah funded Maya's education and created a mentorship program at Stone Tech for young talent from underserved communities, a tribute to his own background and the lesson Maya taught him. He learned that true power lies not in the accumulation of wealth, but in the ability to make a difference, to lift up the oppressed, and to fight for what is right. Dr. Evelyn Reed, the ethical hacker, declined any financial reward but accepted Noah's offer to lead a new cybersecurity division at Stone Tech, on the condition that she could continue her digital activism projects. Stone Tech employees, who had previously seen Noah as a distant leader, now admired and respected him, not only for his intelligence, but for his courage and his new humanity. Maya's mother, with Noah's support, started a small consulting firm, helping other victims of corporate injustice. Everyone recognized Noah's moral triumph, the way he turned humiliation into an opportunity for justice, proving that the best revenge is, indeed, success built on integrity. Noah, sitting in his office with a stunning view of the city, stared at a photo of Maya, smiling. He had built an empire, but it was a little girl who taught him the true value of justice. That "shut up" in the parking lot wasn't an insult, but an awakening. He tried to destroy Noah, but ended up destroying himself. Noah learned that true revenge isn't about repaying the harm suffered. It's about achieving success your enemies could never imagine, and using that success to build a better world. What would you do if you were in Noah's shoes? Let us know in the comments if you've ever faced a similar situation and how you reacted. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice that show that sometimes karma needs a little help from us, and that a child's voice can be the start of a revolution.